"Don't look there," she begged, her voice cracking like dried leather under the merciless California sun. But Nico Larson didn't look away. He stared directly at the burns carved into Mariana Gutierrez's weathered brown skin, at the numbers branded across her collarbone like she was cattle, at the dried blood trailing down her arms where the ropes had eaten through flesh. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched white. And in that moment, every rancher, lawman, and businessman in Fresno County knew he had just made himself their enemy. 3 hours earlier, Mariana had been dragged from her adobe home on the edge of town by men who wore badges but acted like wolves. They accused her of stealing water from the Kingsley estate during the drought. She denied it. They didn't care. They tied her to a wooden post in the center of the empty irrigation field, where the sun cooked everything it touched and mercy was a word no one remembered. Her gray hair hung in tangled clumps. Her dress, torn at the shoulder, revealed the markings they had pressed into her with a heated iron. The letter K for Kingsley, for ownership, for warning. She had screamed until her throat bled. No one came. The men left her there to die slowly, to become an example. That was when Nico rode past on his way back from selling horses in town. He heard her voice, faint and desperate, carried on the wind like a ghost. He could have kept riding. Most men would have. But Nico had never been most men. Now he stood before her, his shadow falling across her trembling body, and the question burning in his mind was simple and terrible. What kind of man stares at a woman suffering and doesn't turn away? The kind who is about to start a war. If this story stirred something in your chest, something that feels like truth trying to break through silence, then maybe you understand why stories like this need to be told. Maybe you know what it feels like when the world tells you to look away, but your heart won't let you. If that's you, then you already know why this matters. Hit subscribe, not for me, for every person who was told their pain didn't deserve witnesses, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from because your presence here right now is part of this story too. Nico pulled his knife from his belt and stepped toward Mariana. Her eyes went wide with fresh terror. Was he here to finish what Kingsley's men had started? Or was he about to do something that would make him a marked man forever? Nico moved slow and deliberate, the way a man moves when he knows he is being watched by forces he cannot see. Mariana flinched as the blade caught the sunlight, and for a heartbeat she thought this was the end. But instead of pressing steel to skin, Nico sliced through the rope at her wrists. The fibers snapped with a sound like breaking teeth. Blood rushed back into her hands, and the pain made her gasp. She sagged forward, and Nico caught her by the shoulders before she could hit the dirt. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "I got you." Mariana looked up at him through tears and dust. Her lips trembled. "Why?" "Because leaving you here would make me the same as them," Nico answered. He shrugged off his leather vest and draped it over her shoulders, covering the brand, covering the shame. His hands were careful, respectful. He didn't stare at her wounds like they were spectacle. He treated her like she was still whole. "They will come for you," Mariana whispered. "Kingsley owns the sheriff. He owns the judge. He owns everyone who matters." "Then I guess I don't matter much," Nico said with a bitter smile. He cut the last rope at her ankles and lifted her to her feet. She wobbled, her legs weak from hours of suspension, but she didn't fall. Nico steadied her with one arm and scanned the horizon. No dust clouds, no riders. Not yet. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I can try." "That's all I need." He led her toward his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare with kind eyes. He helped Mariana into the saddle. then swung up behind her. She leaned back against his chest, too exhausted to care about propriety. The horse started moving, slow and steady, carrying them away from the irrigation field and toward the low hills where the oak trees grew thick. Behind them, the wooden post stood empty in the sun, still stained with her blood. Evidence of a crime no one would ever punish. Evidence that Nico had just stolen. As they reached the tree line, Mariana turned her head and whispered, "There is something you need to know about Kingsley. Something worse than the brand." Nico's grip on the reins tightened. "What is it?" She opened her mouth to answer, but the sound of hoofbeats exploded behind them, fast and furious, and her words were swallowed by the thunder of approaching riders. Nico didn't look back. He kicked the mare into a gallop, and the world became a blur of dust and oak branches whipping past their faces. Mariana clung to the saddle horn, her frail body jerking with every stride. Behind them, the voices of Kingsley's men rose like a pack of hunting dogs who had just caught the scent of blood. "There he is! That's Larson! He's got the old woman!" A gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet hissed past Nico's ear and buried itself in a tree trunk. Splinters exploded. The mare whinnied in panic, but didn't slow. Nico leaned low over Mariana's shoulder, shielding her with his own body as another shot rang out. "They are going to kill us both," Mariana gasped. "Not if I can help it." Nico steered the horse off the main trail and into a narrow ravine choked with manzanita bushes and loose rock. The mare's hooves slipped on the stones, but she found her footing and pushed deeper into the canyon. The riders behind them cursed as their larger horses struggled to follow. Nico knew this land. He had grown up in these hills, hunting deer and rabbits with his father before the ranchers came and fenced everything off. He knew where the ravine split into two paths, one leading to a dead end and the other winding up toward an abandoned line shack his family used to use during cattle drives. He took the left fork without hesitation. The shouts behind them grew fainter. The hoofbeats slowed. Kingsley's men had taken the wrong path. Nico allowed himself one small breath of relief, but he didn't stop riding until the line shack came into view, a sagging structure of warped wood and rusted nails that looked like it might collapse in the next strong wind. He pulled the mare to a halt and helped Mariana down. Her legs buckled, and he caught her again, lowering her gently to the ground inside the shack. Dust motes floated in the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. The air smelled like old hay and mouse droppings. Mariana leaned back against the wall, breathing hard. Her face was gray with exhaustion. "You should have left me," she said. "Now they will hunt you forever." Nico knelt beside her and pulled a canteen from his saddlebag. "Then I guess we have that in common." Mariana took a slow sip of water, then looked at Nico with eyes that had seen too much suffering to carry alone. "I wasn't stealing water," she said quietly. "I was trying to stop them from poisoning it. And now that you have saved me, they are going to come after everyone you love." Nico froze. "What do you mean, poisoning it?" Mariana set the canteen down with trembling hands. Her voice was soft, but every word landed like a stone dropped into still water. "Kingsley has been dumping arsenic into the irrigation channels, small amounts, just enough to make people sick, just enough to drive the smaller farmers off their land when their crops fail and their children get fever." Nico's blood went cold. Why would he do that? "Because sick people sell cheap," Mariana answered. "He has been buying up land for half its value, telling people it is cursed, telling them the soil has gone bad, but the soil is fine. It is the water he has poisoned." Nico felt his hands ball into fists. "How do you know this?" "Because I worked in his house for 30 years, Mariana said. "I cleaned his floors, I washed his clothes. I heard him talking to his foreman late at night when they thought no one was listening. I saw the barrels in the barn marked with skulls. I knew what they were doing, but I was just an old woman. Who would believe me? I believe you. Mariana's eyes filled with tears. That is why they branded me. Not because I stole water, because I threatened to tell the priest. I thought a man of God would listen, but the priest gets his wine from Kingsley's cellar, so instead of justice, I got this. She touched the burned skin on her collarbone, and Nico saw her wince. He stood and paced the small shack, his mind racing. If what Mariana said was true, then Kingsley wasn't just a ruthless rancher. He was a murderer, and the law wouldn't touch him because the law was in his pocket. We need proof, Nico said. Something more than your word. Something that can't be ignored. There is proof, Mariana whispered. In the barn. The barrels are still there. But getting to them means going back to the estate. And if Kingsley's men catch you, they won't just brand you. They will bury you in the desert, where no one will ever find your bones. Nico looked at her, this woman who had survived 6 decades of hardship and cruelty, and he made a decision that would change everything. Then I guess I better not get caught. Mariana grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. There is one more thing you need to know. Kingsley's men are not the only ones hunting you now. He sent word to the marshal in Sacramento. They are saying you kidnapped me. They are saying you are the one who branded me. By tomorrow morning, every lawman in California will be looking for your face. Nico stood frozen, the weight of Mariana's words pressing down on him like a collapsing mineshaft. They had flipped the story, turned him from rescuer into villain. It was brilliant and ruthless, and it meant he couldn't just ride into town and tell the truth. No one would listen. They would hang him before he finished his first sentence. So, what do I do? Nico asked, his voice tight. Mariana pulled herself upright, pain flashing across her face. You do what they don't expect. You go to the people Kingsley has hurt, the farmers who lost their land, the families whose children got sick. You show them the proof, and you let them decide what justice looks like. Nico nodded slowly. It was risky. It was dangerous. But it was the only path that didn't end with him swinging from a rope. I will need help. There is a man named Thomas Reyes, Mariana said. He used to work Kingsley's land until his daughter died from fever last spring. Kingsley paid him to stay quiet, but grief makes men do unexpected things. Find him. Tell him I sent you. He will listen. Nico helped Mariana onto a makeshift bed of old blankets, then checked the mare's saddlebags. He had enough supplies for 2 days, maybe 3 if he rationed carefully. He would have to move fast. Every hour he waited, Kingsley's lies spread further. Before he left, he looked back at Mariana. Why didn't you just leave? Go to another town. Start over. Mariana smiled, sad and knowing. Because running only works if you have somewhere to run to. And men like Kingsley, they own every horizon. Sooner or later, you have to stop running and start standing. Nico felt those words settle into his chest like seeds in good soil. He tipped his hat to her and stepped out into the fading light. The sun was setting over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Somewhere out there, Kingsley's men were still hunting. Somewhere out there, innocent people were drinking poisoned water. And somewhere deep in Nico's heart, a quiet fire was starting to burn. If you are still here, still listening, then you already know this story is about more than one man and one woman. It is about the choice we all face when the world tells us to look away. Some of you watching this have already made that choice. You have stood when others walked past. You have spoken when silence would have been easier. If that is you, then maybe you understand why I am asking you to hit subscribe. Not because I need the numbers, because stories like this disappear when no one bears witness. And maybe, just maybe, your click right now is the thing that keeps this story alive for the next person who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from. Your voice matters more than you know. As Nico mounted his horse and started toward Thomas Reyes's farm, he didn't notice the figure watching from the ridge above. A young boy, no more than 12, with a rifle slung over his shoulder and eyes full of something that looked like hate. The boy turned and ran toward town, and Nico's fate was sealed before he even knew the trap was closing. Thomas Reyes lived in a wooden shack at the edge of a dead orchard. The trees stood like skeletons, their branches bare and twisted, their roots poisoned by water that should have given life. Nico approached slowly, calling out so he wouldn't get shot by a grieving man with nothing left to lose. "Thomas Reyes, Mariana Gutierrez sent me." The door creaked open. A man stepped out, lean and hollow-eyed, with a beard gone grey before its time. He held a shotgun loosely in one hand, not quite pointing it at Nico, but not quite pointing it away either. "Mariana is dead," Thomas said flatly. "Everyone knows Kingsley's men left her in the sun." "She is alive," Nico said, "and she told me about your daughter." Thomas's face changed. Something cracked behind his eyes and the shotgun lowered. "Where is she?" "Safe, for now. But she needs our help. We all do." Nico dismounted and walked closer, hands visible, movements slow. "Kingsley poisoned your water. He poisoned your daughter. And he is going to keep poisoning people until someone stops him." Thomas stared at him for a long moment, then spat into the dirt. "I know. I have always known. But knowing and proving are different things, and proving and surviving are even more different." "Then let's survive together," Nico said. He told Thomas everything: the brand, the confession, the arsenic barrels hidden in Kingsley's barn, the lies spreading about Nico being a kidnapper. By the time he finished, the sun had set completely, and the only light came from a single lantern hanging inside Thomas's shack. Thomas sat down on the porch steps, his shotgun resting across his knees. "If we do this, if we go after those barrels, Kingsley will kill us. You know that, right?" "I know. And even if we get the proof, and the law won't care, they are all bought." "Then we take it to the people," Nico said. "We show them what Kingsley has done, and we let them decide." Thomas looked up at the stars, at the vast California sky that had once promised freedom and opportunity, but had delivered only loss. "My daughter's name was Elena," he said quietly. "She was 7 years old. She liked to sing while she picked apples. After she died, I thought about putting a bullet in Kingsley's head, but I was too much of a coward." "You weren't a coward," Nico said. "You were a father trying to survive." "Maybe," Thomas said, "but I am done surviving. Let's go get those barrels." They saddled Thomas's old mule and rode toward the Kingsley estate under cover of darkness. But halfway there, they heard voices. A group of men with torches moving through the hills, searching. And leading them was the 12-year-old boy Nico had seen on the ridge, pointing directly at the path Nico and Thomas were riding. Nico and Thomas pulled their horses off the trail and into a thicket of scrub oak. The torches moved closer, orange flames bobbing like angry fireflies in the dark. Nico counted 8 men, maybe 10. Too many to fight, too many to outrun if they were spotted. "That is Kingsley's nephew," Thomas whispered, nodding toward the boy. "Name is Charlie. Mean little thing. Likes hurting animals." The boy was talking fast, gesturing wildly. I saw him up by the old line shack. He had the old woman with him. If we hurry, we can catch them both. One of the men, a thick-shouldered brute with a scar across his cheek, grinned. Kingsley said bring Larson back alive if we can, but if we can't, well, accidents happen. They laughed. The sound made Nico's stomach turn. He glanced at Thomas, who had gone pale and still. They were trapped. If they moved, the horses would give them away. If they stayed, the search party would eventually sweep through the thicket. Nico made a decision. He handed Thomas the reins to his mare and whispered, "Get to the barn. Get the proof. I will lead them away." "That is suicide," Thomas hissed. "That is the only chance we have." Nico slipped off his horse and moved to the edge of the thicket. He picked up a rock and hurled it into the darkness, far to the left. It clattered against stone. The men turned toward the sound, torches swinging. "Over there!" Nico bolted from cover, running hard toward the opposite ridge. The men shouted and gave chase. Torches swung wildly as they crashed through the brush. Gunshots cracked the night air, bullets whining past Nico's head. He ran like his life depended on it, because it did. His lungs burned, his legs screamed. But he didn't stop. Behind him, Thomas watched Nico disappear into the darkness, then turned his mule toward the Kingsley estate. He rode low and fast, praying that Nico's sacrifice wouldn't be for nothing. Nico reached a steep ravine and didn't hesitate. He jumped. The fall was longer than he expected. He hit the ground hard, rolling through rocks and thorns. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he forced himself to his feet and kept running. The torches were still behind him, but they were slower now, the men struggling with the terrain. He ducked into a narrow canyon and pressed himself against the rock wall, breathing hard, trying to quiet his heartbeat. The men passed by, cursing and arguing about which way he had gone. Nico waited until their voices faded, then started moving again, circling back toward the estate. He had bought Thomas time. Now he just had to hope it was enough. When Nico finally reached the edge of Kingsley's property, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Thomas's mule was tied outside the barn, but the barn doors were wide open, and inside, lantern light flickered, and standing in the doorway, holding a rifle pointed at Thomas's chest, was Kingsley himself. Nico moved through the shadows like a ghost. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. He could see Thomas inside the barn, hands raised, face pale in the lantern light. Kingsley stood before him, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a fine suit that seemed obscene in a place that reeked of hay and poison. "You thought you could just walk onto my land and steal from me." Kingsley's voice was smooth, almost amused. "You people never learn." "I am not stealing," Thomas said, his voice shaking. "I am taking evidence." Kingsley laughed. "Evidence of what? That I am a businessman? That I know how to turn a profit?" He gestured toward the barrels stacked in the corner, each one marked with a white skull. "Those are for pest control, perfectly legal." "You have been poisoning the water," Thomas said. "You killed my daughter." "Your daughter died of fever," Kingsley said. "Tragic, but not my fault." He raised the rifle slightly. "Now, where is your friend? The one who took the old woman?" Thomas didn't answer. Kingsley's finger moved toward the trigger, and that was when Nico stepped into the barn, hands empty, voice steady. "I am right here." Kingsley turned, and for just a moment surprise flickered across his face. Then he smiled. "Nico Larson, the hero, the man who thinks he can fight the whole world and win." "I am not fighting the world," Nico said. "Just you." Kingsley's smile faded. "You made a mistake coming here. I have men all over these hills. They will find you, and when they do, they will make sure you disappear." "Maybe," Nico said, "but before that happens, I am going to make sure everyone knows what you did. Every farmer, every family, Every person you poisoned. Kingsley's jaw tightened. No one will believe you. They will believe the barrels, Nico said. He nodded toward Tomas. Take one. Get it to town. Show people what is inside. Tomas moved toward the barrels, but Kingsley swung the rifle toward him. Take another step and I will shoot. Nico didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbing the rifle barrel and wrenching it upward. The gun went off, the shot blasting into the barn roof. Splinters rained down. Kingsley was strong, but Nico was desperate. They struggled, crashing into the barn wall, knocking over lanterns. Fire caught on the dry hay. Thomas grabbed one of the barrels and ran for the door. Smoke began to fill the barn. Kingsley drove his knee into Nico's ribs, and pain exploded through his chest. Nico's grip loosened. Kingsley ripped the rifle free and raised it to fire, and then a voice, old and firm, cut through the chaos. Put it down, Kingsley. Everyone froze. Standing in the barn doorway, framed by firelight and smoke, was Mariana Gutierrez. She held Nico's revolver in both hands, aimed directly at Kingsley's chest. Her hands shook, but her eyes didn't. You branded me like an animal, she said. Now let's see if you bleed like one. Kingsley stared at Mariana, and for the first time, Nico saw fear in the man's eyes. Not fear of the gun, fear of being seen, fear that his carefully constructed empire was about to crumble because an old woman refused to die quietly. You are making a mistake, Kingsley said, his voice low and dangerous. The mistake was yours, Mariana replied. You thought I was invisible. You thought I didn't matter. The fire was spreading fast, climbing the barn walls, devouring the old wood. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Nico coughed, his eyes watering. He grabbed Kingsley's rifle and pointed it at the man. Get out. Now. Kingsley hesitated, then slowly backed toward the door. Mariana didn't lower the revolver. She followed him, step for step, until they were all outside in the cool night air. Behind them, the barn groaned and collapsed inward, flames shooting into the sky. Thomas stood nearby, clutching the barrel of arsenic. His face was smudged with ash, but his eyes were bright. We have it. We have the proof. Kingsley looked at the three of them, then at the burning barn, and his face twisted into something ugly. You think this changes anything? You think people will care? I own this town. I own the law. You are nothing. Maybe, Nico said, but nothing has a way of growing when people finally pay attention. In the distance, voices rose. People from the nearby farms had seen the fire and were coming to investigate. Lanterns bobbed through the darkness. Families emerged from their homes. And when they arrived and saw Kingsley standing there, saw the barrel in Thomas's hands, saw the brand on Mariana's skin, something shifted. One woman, thin and worn from years of hard work, stepped forward. My son got sick last year. He almost died. Was that you? A man behind her spoke up. My crops failed. You said the land was cursed, but it wasn't the land, was it? More voices joined. More accusations. The crowd pressed closer, anger replacing fear. Kingsley looked around, and Nico saw the moment the man realized he had lost. Not because of violence, not because of the law, because the people he had hurt for so long had finally found their voices. You are finished, Nico said quietly. Kingsley's hands curled into fists, but there was nowhere to run. The marshal arrived an hour later, called by the crowd, and when he saw the evidence, saw the faces of the families Kingsley had poisoned, even he couldn't ignore it. As Kingsley was led away in chains, he turned and looked at Nico one last time. You think you won? He hissed. You just started a war you can't finish. I have friends, powerful friends, and they will come for you. All of you." Nico watched him go, and a cold certainty settled over him. This wasn't over. Not by a long way. 3 weeks later, Nico stood on Mariana's porch, watching the sun rise over the California hills. The land looked different now. The irrigation channels were being drained and cleaned. The families who had lost their farms were starting to rebuild. Thomas had planted new apple trees in his dead orchard, small saplings that would take years to grow, but represented something bigger than fruit. Mariana sat in a rocking chair, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. The brand on her collarbone was healing, but it would always be there. A scar. A reminder. She didn't try to hide it anymore. "Kingsley's trial starts next week," she said. Nico nodded. "Think they will convict him?" "I think enough people saw the truth that they won't have a choice." She sipped her coffee. "But you were right. It is not over. His friends are already spreading lies, saying we planted the arsenic, saying you forced me to testify." Nico had heard the rumors. He had seen the way some people looked at him now with suspicion instead of gratitude. The powerful did not like losing, and they did not forgive the people who beat them. "So, what do we do?" Thomas asked. He had joined them on the porch, his shotgun leaning against the wall. "We keep telling the truth," Nico said. "We keep standing, because the moment we stop, they win." Mariana set down her coffee and looked at Nico with eyes that had seen too much suffering, but had not lost their fire. "You did something no one else would do. You looked at me when everyone else turned away. You saw me when they wanted me invisible. That is not a small thing." "It was the only thing," Nico said. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the fields. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. Families were gathering for Sunday service, and the priest was going to talk about justice. Not the kind that came from money or power, but the kind that came from standing together. Nico thought about the boy who had led Kingsley's men to him.